This week on Quick Save the Podcast, we're discussing our early spoiler-free thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. We're also taking another look back at the PS5 reveal, discussing Spider-Man Miles Morales, what should change in the Demon Souls Remake, and why we're excited for Horizon Forbidden West. Check the timestamps below to jump straight into the discussion. Hello and welcome to the one and only Quick Save the Podcast. I'm your host Mitch, and joining me is The Last of Us himself, Callum.
Greetings.
Yeah, so that's kind of a hint of what we're about to literally just jump straight into. No spoilers, of course. So with you, Callum, how are you liking it?
I find this a really interesting game because I feel like I'm kind of in the minority in this one, in the sense there's been obviously like a massive backlash in like recent days and over the last week and so, and even when the leaks came out as well about like certain things that were happening in the story that people weren't impressed with. But for me personally, so far I'm probably 7-8 hours in, and I'm really enjoying it so far. Yeah, because I think we're roughly at the same point until a couple of days ago. And usually, for a Naughty Dog game, that would be, a good stretch of it, like a good chunk. But apparently this, I feel even after that length of time, like it's still fairly early into the game. Like it's sort of fairly extensive runtime.
Yeah, like I'm 4 or 5 hours in, which is about half of the original game.
Yeah.
And I feel like I haven't even touched the game.
Me too. And it has a fairly extensive prologue anyway that kind of sets, the story in motion and stuff, like the first good kind of couple of hours. But for me personally, again, yeah, I just feel like I'm in the minority because I'm really loving it. Like I thought the first game was fantastic as well, but in some ways I actually think I'm enjoying this one more so. I think we'll go into detail about like things they've done differently with the gameplay and stuff, but my overall impression so far is that I'm really enjoying it. I can't wait to play more, but I'm taking it slowly. So yeah, what about yourself?
Less positive. I definitely preferred The Last of Us, and not because of the backlash issues and all that.
Yeah,
I actually preferred it being a linear, like moment-to-moment story. I just think it was better when it was more focused. It's not like I'm disliking it. I am enjoying it. The story's interesting. I'm looking forward to where it goes throughout the game.
Definitely. It was interesting even before they came out. There was that comment by Troy Baker that it was going to be controversial. And I think there was even something by Neil Druckmann himself where he said something along the lines of this game's going to prove quite divisive among the fan base. And I think at the time, like people kind of semi-believed it, but didn't totally believe it because like to an extent, Naughty Dog games have always played it fairly safe. But to me, I would say that like this is their game where they've actually taken risks in the sense of not only story, for sure in terms of story beats, even early into the game, but also in terms of, like you said, making it more open. I think that was an inherent risk because always their strength has been these very kind of on rails, kind of linear experiences where they want you to experience these kind of like set moments from moment to moment.
Uncharted 4 did drive away from that a little bit, pun intended, because they gave you a car to kind of explore an environment, and Lost Legacy push that even further. You had this big open environment where you could pick kind of what puzzles do you want to tackle in any order, which so you could see Naughty Dog was building up to this. And like just because I personally don't love open world in this kind of setting doesn't mean that I don't appreciate the effort they've put into crafting the world of Seattle, which is very pretty. Like it's cool how they've made such a like post-apocalypse destroyed skyscrapers and stuff kind of look kind of pretty. Yeah,
that's the thing. Like that to me, actually, the more I think about the game, to me, because I mean, I'm really enjoying the story as well, but that kind of remains to be seen how it sort of ends and stuff. But I think based on what I played and what I actually think it does better than the original game is just that sense of immersion. Because to me, especially because it's a post-apocalypse story, I think it's really important that you actually feel yourself immersed in a world because it's such an outlandish sort of premise and such an extreme thing of like humanity being kind of having to like fight it out to survive. Like it's
is it though? I mean, people are fighting over toilet paper and stuff.
Yeah, that's very true.
20 has changed my vision of what people are willing to do for. Man, imagine if that actually happened. Like how people would act and just like. I think The Last of Us captures what happened after quite well, but I'm curious. I would like to see, this is kind of going off a bit, of like a story in The Last of Us where it's just like takes place during the escalation of the virus.
That's a good point because I feel like that's something the original Last of Us did for kind of a sliver of the game, like probably that opening
just to
kind
break
of
your
hour
heart
or so.
just real quickly.
Where it kind of, and I thought that was cool in the sense that, you often see the post-apocalypse, but you don't really see the apocalypse itself.
The apocalypse now.
Yeah, exactly. The current apocalypse. But that to me, just having played The Last of Us, I mean, the presentation, as you expect, is pretty exceptional. Like it's definitely up there with, the PS4's best looking games, if not the best.
There's an argument to be made there.
Well, apparently I've heard people saying that Uncharted 4 actually is still, like, probably looks as good, which is a testament to how good that game looked a few years back.
I think God of War is better looking, but that's just because you can go nuts with like the fantasy, the mythology and all that.
That's true, yeah.
And I think that's its strength. The Last of Us, it does look real. Like, I'm curious where they can take games if this is how good they look now.
And it's interesting what you said. I feel like it's very true about, like, this kind of, like, weird beauty to it as well. Because, especially because it is more open, you actually, which I thought was really cool, is you actually see kind of skyscrapers and buildings, and they're kind of just on the cusp of being able to actually explore them. And so you see kind of the ruin of, like, these old kind of, like, buildings and stuff. But then there's actually really beautiful settings of, like, the forest and, like, the greenery and stuff as well. So it's kind of almost a nice kind of contrast.
I think the gameplay is still its weakest aspect.
I feel like this game, more so than the original one, almost demands to be played as a stealth game, because you always really feel outnumbered and sort of and literally sort of like underpowered compared to everyone else. And I think that's a strength of it, because it sort of reinforces what's brought in the narrative as well.
There's groups of maybe 5+ at any given moment. You're never the one with all the power. So it always creates this kind of tense feeling of like how you navigate these areas, as well as the infected being still utterly terrifying. Like, it is a zombie game. The zombies are meant to be the ever-looming threat that's there.
Yeah, for sure.
That's why they're being slow and all that.
And it's, another thing I think we'll comment on is that, like, I'm not sure if you feel the same, but I feel this game has taken kind of the dark, quote-unquote, aspect to another level. Like, I feel like there are kind of lighter moments and stuff, even in the first few hours and stuff, and these moments to kind of balance it out. But I feel like, to a greater extent, it really shows kind of the worst of humanity, like even in the first kind of 4 or 5 hours. And I feel like the original game always had this kind of more optimistic undertone, because it was kind of this father-son dynamic, father-daughter dynamic. And there were kind of more lighter moments, kind of slower, where you were joking around with Ellie and stuff, and it just felt a bit more kind of grounded like that. Whereas in this one, it really goes into some dark places, and it's quite brutal.
Which is interesting to see them push in a video game, where for the most part they're seen by the vast majority of people as like something fun to unwind, but they can be more than that. And The Last of Us Part 2 is definitely like, there is conversations to be had that are more in depth than just whether the game plays good. It's like delving into the story, like
themes and
and like even things of like making you, the player, feel bad about your actions and like question stuff, which is always something fascinating. But yeah, I think gameplay, as I said, for me is still weak. I think there are areas where it's gotten better.
Yeah, like I think for the most part, even the movement, I think, feels a bit smoother. Like that was always one of my things about the original, one of the few things.
And most Naughty Dog games.
Yeah, exactly. It just doesn't feel totally kind of smooth, and like it's almost like the polish that's there in the presentation, the technical aspects, isn't always there in the gameplay. But for the most part, this one, I think you kind of move around in like a nice kind of like smooth way. Like I still think probably the gold standard as far as games like that go is probably Metal Gear Solid 5. I think that game to me felt like perfect in terms of the stealth and the movement. But I think this is an improvement in that sense.
We're pretty early in. There is a lot of
there's still a long way to go. Yeah.
And here's what we think as we go through it. Anyway, earlier this week, I had a discussion with a friend and technically the co-founder of this channel, Russell. So I wanted to talk to him about the PlayStation 5 and get a bit more in depth. Thanks for joining me so far, Callum.
No worries.
And we'll have you on the show next week.
Sounds good.
I've shined the PlayStation logo in the sky to summon our PlayStation fanboy, Russell.
I always come for PlayStation. Like as soon as the beacon comes up, I'm like, I'm there.
So that kind of moves me on to talking about the PlayStation 5 itself. What do you think about that design?
It's ambitious and extremely unique. I guess I'd already got used to the controller, so I knew it was going to be that multi-tone anyway. So like the fact that it was white and black didn't surprise me. I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen. And I fully expected the blue light was going to be a big part of it too. I guess I just didn't expect it to be as out there as it was. And particularly like afterwards, I don't know if you've seen like comparison sizes on how big the thing is.
It's like, it's huge.
It's so big. I'm like, it's compared to every console ever, and you go, holy shit. It's exciting. I think the visual design, you're like, oh, this is new. I don't think any of the previous consoles like this. It's all been pretty by the numbers, this is a tick box. This is like, no, this stands out. When you buy this thing, people are going to, if they haven't seen it before and they don't know what a PS5 is, they will go, what the hell is that thing?
It's cool that they've done both a disc version and a disc. I think the discless looks better because it's more symmetrical.
I definitely
got the little chunky little.
That's definitely why they did it. It's just like, it just looks better without the disc drive. The thing I wonder is how big a difference is it going to be that justifies you even considering this? Because to me, I'm like, okay, so you can't share games, you can't use the 4K capabilities to watch any 4K Blu-rays. There's all these things like you'd want, and also I'm also thinking file space all the time these days. I'm like, every game now is like 100 gig, and these consoles, I think they already said it'll be 800 gigabytes or something. It's not even a terabyte.
Yeah, it's something too small.
Yeah, so it's already, I'm like, you get 8 games on it, and that's a digital-only console?
What they could have done, I guess, is give it a big hard drive and then put them on price parity, but obviously the discless is like, the cheaper option. I don't know what I think it should cost, but it's kind of scary to think about the fact that the PS4 was $550 at launch here.
Yeah, I'm about to say, we're talking Australian prices here, because there's a big difference.
It was already kind of getting expensive. Now I think these things are going to cost a lot. And yeah, what do you reckon they'll cost?
The PS5's going to go for 800 Australian, 700 for the discless version. Maybe 650.
I put $699 and $599 as like the hopeful one. But I'm pretty sure you're probably right. Because there are leaks about how much it costs. And they're saying $550 US. So with the current climate, that's about $800.
The discless one is the one where I'm really not sure anymore, because I'm not sure how much of a difference it's going to make in terms of costs. Because really, there's no way I wouldn't want the disc version. So the only reason I could see, I think a lot of other people wanting to get the discless version is if it is a real big price difference, and that price difference makes it to that kind of price tag, where it's like $550 or $600 or something. And then hence the original one's like around $800. That's all I can think of, like why this disc version. I mean, also the design. So the design definitely looks sleeker and sexier without the disc tray.
The leak suggests that discless is $100 less. So it's a reasonable difference, but I don't know if it's going to change people's minds.
It's one of those things though now, is like, who's jumping first? Like, is Microsoft going to reveal that price tag, or is it Sony?
I wonder if because of these rumors that Microsoft might be more confident and just go like, here's our price. Come on, Sony, show us your hand. Xbox
has said some weird stuff in the sense of like, when you're trying to sell a new console, it's basically like, you don't have to upgrade for like at least the first year. I'm like, okay. So that basically implies that nothing you release in the first year is worth getting the new console for. And it's kind of, but I said, so to me, it's like, it's consumer focused. Like, if you're a consumer right now, you don't have to buy new stuff. That's basically what Xbox is. And I'm like, that's the opposite of what I want. I'm like, if I'm buying a next gen console, I'm like, I want them to utilize it. And like, you can't get this shit on last gen. It's all this kind of stuff. I'm like, Sony's doing that. I guess it's way less consumer, and I expect the console's going to be expensive. That is what I want. Like, I want new powerful games to showcase it, not just it's got a better 4K texture pack or something like that. It's weird that the Xbox is the most powerful one, but it seems like they have no interest in utilizing it.
They go for a more service under outlook, where they get people in with Game Pass and all, and a much more PC kind of like, everything just continues, everything keeps working. Obviously, people who play PC gaming as like their main thing, like me, are like, I'm okay with that. But it does mean they've sort of shot themselves in their feet, because I don't need to buy it now. What am I buying it for? Exclusives? No, I'm not.
You might be getting to it later, but that's the one thing about the PlayStation conference that like it was bad at. Xbox, it's over the top, but at least you understand everything in that sense. Sony, I'm like, I did not understand what was exclusive and not by the end. And I don't even know if I still fully do know, because there were a lot of consoles exclusives and ones that aren't, like Resident Evil, declared after the fact it wasn't. Like, there was so many things that it was not clear about.
Yeah, it's like Kana, Bridge of Spirits is that real Disney looking one that looked incredible. That is coming to PC at launch. At least they showed games, unlike Microsoft, whose gameplay reveal was really disappointing. So I think we should move on to actually talking about the games, because we did a podcast on this thing where we broke down a bit of it, but didn't really go in depth. So I thought there was a few where you'd be the right choice for. So Spider-Man Miles Morales is that last light, spin-off-y thing, first light.
Once again, another thing where like it wasn't clear. Like I got that vibe because I was expecting something like that. Miles Morales, it wasn't that. I was like, I think there's going to be a Spider-Man game and it's going to be like First Light. And then when I saw the Miles Morales, I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly what this is. But they never clarified that until now. I think they have clarified it now. It's like it is more of they say it's not an expansion, but it's expanding upon what Spider-Man 1 was. It's not Spider-Man 2.
They couldn't have been more unclear in their messaging.
It's one of those things just like I definitely know it's not. It's not. You're not going to get. I don't know if I should spoil things, but there's things that they set up at the end of 1, including Miles Morales, I don't think you'll get answers to those things. I think this is truly Miles' story enhanced through the PS5, where it's like, it's Christmas. Obviously, you got snow. It almost reminds of Arkham Origins. It's like, oh, put more visual things going on, so it looks way better.
Yeah, what can we do to this city? Snow.
Well, it's one of those things where I'm like, every time I see any visuals now, I instantly think of like, what's the best things that get enhanced by 4K and HDR for me? And like every time it's lighting, anything to do with lighting, it's like literally like neon, fire, like these kind of things like really pop out. And as soon as I see all these enemies with like neon things, I'm like, yeah, that's gonna look badass. And another thing was like, every time Mark Cerny talked about the PS5, he was always talking about how it did for Spider-Man. I'm like, that tells me they're actively playing around with Spider-Man right now. And they're always like, oh, it can run so much faster, no load times, all this kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, that definitely means there's something Spider-Man coming. So we can expect all those improvements, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as impressive graphically as Horizon's going to be, where it's like, this to me, I think is, they've done it quickly. They're showcasing what PS5 can do. It's basically going to be a launch style if they haven't already confirmed that. I don't think they have, but they
have. I'm pretty sure they have.
I mean, it's like the same time period, so I assume it is, but it might not. I mean, it kind of has to be, I think.
Well, what else do they have? They didn't announce anything else as a launch title. But like, Spider-Man's launch title is probably the smartest thing they could do.
Yeah.
Like, out of all the games, just how well Spider-Man sold so quickly.
I think it's
like that.
As I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure it's the best-selling PlayStation 4 game.
And like, that's a momentum you want when launching a console. You just want this game the sequel to a game that everyone was talking about, the character that everyone kind of loves.
Yeah. Exactly. Not to mention, that's really like the good thing right now. It's like Miles is having a very big movement right now, where it's like the movie Spider-Verse was like amazing. Like, I think it's the best Spider-Man story ever told at least in a non-comic book medium. Where it's like, I personally think that. I'm like, I think the movies or the games have been better than that. I think the games are probably pretty close. I think it had a lot of problems, but I think story-wise, what I really like is Peter Parker is old. I like when Peter Parker's experienced and he's not the young kid, which they're doing right now in the movies. Because I've just seen it so many times. I like it when he's more experienced and he's done a lot of things. And I like this idea of Peter mentoring Miles, because into Spider-Verse they kind of did, but ultimately in the normal comics, it's like the whole point, Miles Morales becomes Spider-Man because his Spider-Man dies in his universe. It's not going to kill him, because obviously they need a future game, but
so you got to survive.
He's got to be taken out of the picture, I think, for Miles to have his story. Like, I put my money on like the Prowler, his uncle, will be the main villain, or at least very tied to the main villain, because that's such a personal story and very tied to his origins to begin with. Somehow I got to think Peter's going to be out of the picture. So I don't know if it's like it's Christmas, so he's on holiday or something. You know,
he's on holiday,
or whatever it is, just to get him out. Or I said he's captured by the villain or what. Somehow Peter has to be out of the picture, I think, for Miles to shine. I mean, it could be wrong. Maybe Peter will show up, but it's the problem you always have when you get like Justice League and all the shit, where it's like, how do you have the idea of like Batman's taking on all these guys, but he could have Superman fly in any second and Flash or whatever, you know? It's like, it becomes problematic when you build this universe.
Do you have to give a reason for them not to be there? It's just like, well, Superman should show up and to save the day, right? That's Superman's thing. But imagine the story goes like Peter is training him, something happens.
Yeah. I would put my money on that's almost certainly what will happen. It's like, oh, Peter's there, and then something happens, and now...
I am disappointed that we don't get to see what unfolds after Spider-Man, the first one. Like,
they could do some of that stuff, but I honestly really don't think so. I think that it's really focused on Miles' stuff, and I don't think personally he fits into what was set up at the end as nearly as well as Peter does. And I think they want to save it. The stuff they reveal at the end, I'm like, this is what people want, and it makes sense for that to be the second game. Third game, I've got ideas, but they tie to what I think second game will be about. But it's like, I don't think this will feature any of that stuff. I think it'll just focus on the Miles stuff and showcase what the PS5 can do at launch. I said you'll swing around way faster, the visuals will be great, all this kind of stuff.
Moving on to the surprise, but kind of like expected surprise, was Demon Souls getting a full remake by Bluepoint. But my question is, how substantial of a remake should it be? Because there are parts in Demon Souls that are awful.
Demon Souls, that was the first one I played, and I remember hating it initially. I was just playing it I almost didn't play it seriously, so I was just dying a lot, and I didn't understand that mechanic at all. I don't know how it worked, so things started to get like out of control because it's such a weirdly complicated system. Where it's like the worse you are, the harder it gets for you, because they just
it's just like, okay.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I guess it fits into the Dark Souls kind of like idea, but I mean, it's something they changed later, so I think even then it was still like just something they thought, oh yeah, this might be cool, but it's like it becomes extremely punishing. But it's one of those games where I played it, didn't like it, and then I came back to it later. Still before Dark Souls, but by that point I knew what the world tendency was. I don't remember why I knew it. I think I looked it up or something. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe I should start again as a new character and actually try to play properly and like really focus on not dying, as opposed to like, I wrote off a cliff or whatever.
Some areas it's really hard to not die.
Yeah.
Which is areas they kind of show Tower of Latria. They didn't show Valley of Defilement, and I know why, because you don't want to show people that shithole.
Freaking goddamn venom pool shit.
Yep, that From Software loves.
Yeah, I don't know why they put them in every game. Like even Sekiro had a goddamn venom pool thing in it.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
In Sekiro, it was more reasonable though. But yeah, it's freaking. Oh god, I hate it. It's weird because I keep putting in, but it's such a bad visual. I'm like, it looks horrible. Why do you?
Yeah, no one actually likes it, and it's just like things like that. I think this should be a substantial remake because not only does the gameplay itself feel dated, and that's not a good look coming into next gen. The areas are quite old. They don't all feel good. Most of them don't feel great at all. And finally, the bosses are really simple.
Yeah.
Compared to
that's something
games.
I think in hindsight they were more gimmicky. Like you played it recently, right? Oh, reasonably recently.
Yeah, I played it 2 years ago. And
okay, yeah, certainly way more recently than I did. And as I recall, the bosses are mostly based. They're not Shadow of the Colossus, but it's like they're hard still in a Dark Souls-y way. But once you know the solution, they're way easy to beat. Almost all of them, except for the
only a couple mechanics really.
Yeah, except for that flame guy. That guy's a pain in the ass. The Flame Lurker or whatever he is.
I beat him on my first attempt.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think off memory, he was the hardest boss I had. So Flame Lurker probably had a mechanic too, but I remember Flame Lurker being like what they became later. Like most of them were like Flame Lurker. It's like you just have to get good at the mechanics more than it was like here's a thing you use to kill it. Like you solve the puzzle, you do it. There's a lot of cool bosses though. I love the is it Storm King? The manta ray.
Storm King, the one in the sky. Yeah, that's still a gimmick you fight because you get the Storm King's sword, which they repeat with Yorm in Dark Souls 3.
Right.
It's just, and there's also the Dragon God, which is kind of like
I always like the dragon. I mean, these are ones that I remember them, so they stand out. Even though essentially
they're also the only ones in the trailer.
It's like a stealth section where you just sneak past it. It's more of a task than it is like a fight, which is a shame because like that's the one they put all in the visuals, and it still stands out though because he's visually cool and it's the area looks awesome. But I can't wait to see what it looks like in the remake. But it's still like as a boss, it's literally like do two things and the boss is dead. Like that's essentially what it is.
They're also the only ones in the trailer.
Oh, you good point. Yeah, they are all the ones in the trailer. Which is crazy. We should get to the visuals though. How freaking good it looks.
Oh man, like people are getting mad that it doesn't capture the atmosphere. I'm just like, screw that. This game looks awesome.
Really? They don't capture the atmosphere.
All the dark and browns and
to me that was
greys
just like a visual restriction. Like it was like smoke and shit, so you couldn't see stuff.
Yeah, it was like smoke and mirrors.
It's literally like we've got all this fog in because we can't. The textures are bad or whatever. I could be wrong. Maybe it was an atmospheric decision, but it reminds us of Silent Hill and stuff. Where it's like, yeah, it is part of the atmosphere, but I always looked at it as like it's hiding stuff because it would look really bad without the fog in it.
So like they showed off Tower Knight as being one of the screenshots.
Yeah.
They showed off the start area, which is like. All of it just looks. It's clearly not From Software's style. Actually, like it doesn't look like Dark Souls 3 or.
I would agree that it looks amazing, but there's something un-From Software about it.
Is that necessarily a bad thing?
I don't know. I thought the same thing. I'm like, I don't know if it's a bad thing though. It's like Bluepoint are someone who like with Shadow Colossus, like they're crazy good at raising stuff up and making them look like incredible. And yeah, I guess I don't know. The more I think, I'm like, I guess you're losing. Some of the atmosphere, like the tower one in the trailer, it looks almost more blizzardy to me because it's got like those blue banners and stuff that makes it more colorful. The original one I remember it being extremely dark. I mean, everything's just kind of dark and drab in Demon Souls and most of it really. But I can see people maybe complaining about, but even then, I look at it as like it's a game where I feel like most people would not have played it. I think most people, the first game in the series they played was Dark Souls, and I think they did not want to go back and play Demon Souls. And if they did, they probably played it, didn't like it, and quit.
Unless they're stupid like me, who played through it, didn't like it, but still beat it. I mean, I say don't like it, but there were things in there that like were worth maybe a remake.
And also, I think it had the Estus Flask wasn't a thing until Dark Souls 1.
No, it was the grass, like the...
Yeah, there was no restriction. You could just farm them and get as many as you want. Yeah, you could use the heck out of it in Demon Souls. And they had multiple healing items too, if I recall correctly. It wasn't even just like one. Like this one, this one, this
scales
one.
up. So even if you're like, okay, I'm starting to run low on that, I'll use the older one.
How far do you reckon they would go though? Would it go Sekiro far, whereas like there's no stamina bar anymore? Like that's not a thing?
I'm not actually sure. I think they would keep that. I think the fundamental idea of the gameplay wouldn't shift, but I think everything within that will shift. Like, because everything feels like Dark Souls. It kind of felt a bit slow. Demon Souls just feels worse in every way.
I wouldn't be surprised if they improved it as they went. I mean, it's obviously not, once you get further along, it's like, I mean, that's not even the goal of Sekiro, but like Bloodborne stuff, like obviously by that point, things have been kind of perfected, but
either way, like this game, I'm very excited to play it, but I'm just curious what they've done to it. So I think the other game I want to talk about is Horizon Forbidden West, which unfortunately we can't really talk about how it connects to the original without spoiling the original.
In the trailer itself, it's almost just, it doesn't spoil things necessarily, but it's very much like, well, this thing only means something if you played the first game.
Yeah, and like I was watching it with Callum, and it was just like, oh, silence. I'm just like, yeah, you probably should have finished the first game.
Oh, so he's played it, but he hasn't won it?
No, he is like at the end, like at the last hour. He hasn't finished it in like over a year. Like, finish the game. But I think the thing that's striking about Horizon is obviously the visuals, but like how big this world is.
They definitely gave a strong impression of scale, like massive, like really big.
This looks like an entire world. Because it's like, they show deserts, but it doesn't look like it connects to the other place at all. And obviously it has to somehow fade into it. Then you got the mountains, you got the jungle of San Francisco by the look of it.
The coolest thing about Horizon is its lore, because the lore explains how like certain biomes could exist together. Where it's like, this doesn't make sense. Why is there like a freaking like snowy area next to a desert? Like, that doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Yeah, that's what I thought when I kept saying it. It's just like,
but it's just like, no, there's a reason. There's a reason for everything. That's why I like it so much. It's like they set everything up. It's similar to almost God of War, where it's like God of War, I feel like it's more subtle, and only when you really pay attention, it's like, oh man, they set up so much stuff in God of War for the future games. Where like Horizon was more, I think, obvious about, where it's like, oh, we'll talk about these things, but there's also like 7 other things on the list they never describe or talk about. I was like, well, we know some of those are going to be important. One of which is clearly the water. And I'm like, oh yeah, I saw that coming a mile away. Whereas like the swimming stuff. And it's funny because they show off the I'm pretty sure it's called the Snapjaws, the crocodile. That was the one where I'm like, when in this first game, they're the only really aquatic robot, but you can't swim. So I mean, you can swim, you just can't go underwater or do anything combat wise underwater. That was when I was already thinking, I'm like, oh yeah, sequel, they're definitely going to go water mechanics, and there's going to be combat in the water, all this kind of crazy stuff.
No easy thing to add, like flying.
Yeah, and that's another one. I'm like, that's the next one. So I'm like, is it in this game though? Are you going to have flying mechanics? Possibly.
I'm going to say you can fly. It looks big enough to let that happen. I think the original, they had like some limitations with like size of the areas, which clearly isn't a problem now, because it's just like the SSD solves everyone's issue.
And they had very much, I know, because it came out either the same month as Breath of the Wild or extremely close. I do wonder if Horizon, because I remember it was such a big thing back then where people go, oh, this is why Breath of the Wild's better than Horizon or whatever, even though they were almost conceptually different games anyway. But I remember constantly the climbing thing, whereas I was like, oh, yeah, Horizon's also, it feels so restrictive, where it's like, you've got to climb this path and all this kind of stuff. And then Breath of the Wild is where it's like, you just have a limited stamina pool and you can just climb it. Or not even that, you can just climb anything. Like Assassin's Creed, I think there was no restrictions. Like, you just climb everything.
Curious of the range of mechanical beasts. They showed an elephant, which is like, reminded me of Lord of the Rings, the elephant.
Oh yeah, well, as soon as they literally, when I watched the trailer, and the second they blow the horn, I'm like, the mama kill, and then straight after the freaking elephants go in, I'm like, oh yeah.
What actual, like, this is kind of hypothetical, but like, what animal do you want to see turned into a robot?
My first thought was directly modified by the trailer, and that was, they showed a freaking dragon, a literal dragon.
Yep, that's it.
And then as soon as I saw that, I went, well, now anything's on the goddamn table. Because I don't know why. I guess you had dinosaurs in the original, but I'm still like, I guess we know they existed as opposed to dragons where there's no evidence. But now when I see dragons, I'm like, well, now they can do freaking anything. They could just go, I'll put Cthulhu in here because once again, it's hard to get around it because of how the story works. I can't remember what's known and what's not known, but there's reasons why everything's created the way it is. And it's very much like anything's possible. So they showed a dragon. It was like she was kind of scanning it and like interpreting what was going on, whatever was going on there. But I'm like, well, there's no reason there can't be a dragon just because of the universe they set up. They can literally be a dragon.
There should be a dragon because dragons are awesome. And it's like you think of like the Beast Wars show and like Megatron's a dragon.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have anything. They didn't really have much transforming things. Like there were some monsters like I can't remember what that saber-tooth one was called, but there were, and even the big one, the T-Rex one, which I forgot what that was called too. But that thing had like laser beams and shit on it. Whereas like there were times where like it wasn't just like, oh, it looks like that creature. Like no, they had crazy movesets based on nothing to do with their visual design. It was just like, oh, there's also a giant Gatling gun thing on this creature or whatever. And there was some really, really cool creatures in that first game. I do also wonder if you'll get a lot more like that turtle one. I always get the impression like, oh, maybe you'll get robots that aren't even combat encounters. Just pure. I guess the Tornax were that in the first game, which are essentially the walking maps.
They just wandered around the map, yeah.
Yeah. So
that's probably dead, I think.
But you could get a lot of that kind of stuff where it's like, here's just some crazy shit where it's like, here's like a mammoth or something. just like some giant thing where it's like, here's, like the whales, but instead of being a whale underground, like in the water, it's a freaking whale that floats, just like some Death Stranding stuff or something. Where it's just like, here's just break what you, because I feel like it'd be more exciting in a way because it's like you automatically associate like, oh, this is this creature, so this is what it can do. But then you go, oh no, what if you have the heart of what the creature is, but change its mechanics? It's like, oh, it's a giant whale in the sand or something.
Sand whales or sand sharks. Even better.
Well, what are you looking forward to seeing in terms of a monster design?
I mean, you already took mine. It was dragon, but
okay.
like a large, like robotic wolf, or just add the Liger Zero from Zoids. So I think it's time to get a bit Metacritical. Each and every episode, we take a portal through the various areas of the multiverse to end up on Metacritic, unfortunately. There's a lot of better realms out there, Russell. You visited them. And so we come here to bet on what score we think a game will get at launch by the critics, or merged together to create a Metacritic score. So this week we're betting on Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, which has been delayed till next week, which I know it's already got a score for the original. I didn't look at it. You most certainly did not, because you didn't know this existed. And just if you don't know, it's a racing game based on the Phantom Menace's pod racing sequence. So Russell, you need to represent Callum, someone you've never met, don't really know, but you need to kind of fight for his honor in a sense. You must pick a score for him. If he loses, he's forced to play a game of my choice.
I played it a lot as a kid and I loved it, but I still feel like it's one of those games where it's like GoldenEye, you go back and it's probably shit. But I also don't think, until I didn't even know it was coming out, so I don't think many people will review it, which inherently means the Metacritic score will be adjusted because you'll have less people reviewing it. So then the question is, are the people who review it actually going to be really into it, or are they people who have played it in the past and going back and then realizing it wasn't as good as they thought? So I'm thinking, balance it out, average it, give it a 7.
So 70.
Yeah, 100, yeah, 70.
I'm going to go 78. So if people get stupidly nostalgic, this seems a dumb idea, but if they're really nostalgic, not a lot of people do it, gets a really inflated score, I'm in. So, find out on the next podcast.
Oh, I mean, the game might hold up extremely well. People playing like, oh, this game's like a 90. It's freaking amazing.
I actually really liked it when I played it not long ago. So I think that's it for this episode of Quick Save the Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. I've been Mitch, joining me has been Russell.
Always good to talk Sony.
Let us know in the comments below what you thought about the episode, what you're excited for about the PlayStation, and if you really enjoyed it, like it, subscribe it, all those things you can do, and hopefully we'll see you again, as there's always a podcast to save. Bye everyone.
The first thing that went through our mind was like, what's the podcast called again? I'm like, yeah, Quick Save, that's right.
Quick Save the Podcast. Like a track, because quickie. That's funny.